welcome to another episode of Your Right to Know, brought to you by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. Today is a very special show. It's the first time in 2 years that we have done a live show, and we want to welcome you to the Workers Credit Union studios here at FATV. And today we have a very special guest and a friend and not a stranger to the Your Right to Know show. It would be Rick Green, CEO of A1 Auto and former Republican candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives, 3rd Congressional District. How are you doing today, Rick?
Good, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Now, Rick, can you have the audience tell the audience a little bit about yourself today?
Sure. I run a company, 1A Auto. My brother and I started it literally out of a garage now over 20 years ago, selling auto parts online. We have over 11,000 YouTube videos where we show folks how to install their own parts, kind of do-it-yourself, DIY is our main customer. And I've been blessed to have a lot of success, and I wanted to share that with other people. That's how I got into politics. That's why I ran for Congress back in 2018. I'm married, my wife Maggie, 3 kids. They're 11, 9, and 7. Very concerned with what's going on in our community, in our schools, in our country. And I just want to do my part, and that's why I'm here to talk to you today.
Excellent. Now, Rick, you're a Republican, and you're proud of it. So, were you always a Republican or conservative in your thinking?
Certainly, I was always conservative in my thinking. I know I registered as a Republican initially, and then I was away in school, out of state, and then a few years after college and going to business school. And when I came back to Massachusetts, I registered unenrolled. And I remember thinking that everyone says that all the action's in the Democratic primary, and so my thought was, well, if I register unenrolled, then I can vote in those Democratic primaries and maybe choose the lesser of two evils, if you will. The reality was I never actually ended up voting in a Democrat primary. I've only ever voted in Republican primaries. And at some point, I decided, it was really Scott Brown's election to the U.S. Senate when I decided that I've got to get back involved. I joined my local town committee. I went down to town hall, switched back to Republican, and I've been involved in Republican politics, at some level ever since.
Now, you also have a role in the MASS Fiscal Alliance. What role do you have, and what is the Massachusetts Fiscal Alliance?
Well, so originally I founded the Massachusetts Fiscal Alliance. So my role today actually is more cheerleader. The organization has kind of taken on its own life, and when I ran for Congress, I stepped down from the board. But I founded the organization. Its role is providing a right-of-center economic message that we so sorely lack here in our state. And it's been extremely successful. As a matter of fact, since I've left, I just kind of watch in awe. The TCI, the Transportation Climate Initiative, was a multi-state. It was somewhere between 13 and 16 states, going all the way down to Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania. And the folks over at MASS Fiscal, Paul Craney and others, they led the charge regionally with some other nonprofit groups, and they stopped it. It's just fun to see something that you had a part in creating, that it lives on and has as much impact as MASS Fiscal does.
That's very impressive.
And not only did they stop it, were instrumental in stopping it, but they also were instrumental in getting Governor Baker to withdraw on it, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. It is kind of sad that Massachusetts was the last state to withdraw.
Hold out.
And essentially, it's not that Massachusetts withdrew, it's literally that every other state withdrew, and then Massachusetts was the last state standing. It kind of shows the work you have cut out for you, that you could stop it in a dozen other states, and then and only then could you stop it here in Massachusetts. But imagine, what we're paying for gas now. Think about if the Transportation Climate Initiative happened. Wow.
Well, and I did a lot of standing out last year in the fall to get the signature petitions on getting that repealed. And one of the things gas was cheap back then. And it was like, oh, it's so cheap, it doesn't matter, it's for the environment and all this. And I said, nobody worries about adding a few cents. And it was not a few cents, it was maybe up to 15 cents per gallon when the prices of fuel is low. But when the price of fuel goes up, which of course people never count on, that's when you're going to hit yourself upside the head and say, what did I do?
Yeah. Well, not only that, it's regressive, right? I mean, who does it hit hardest of all? It hits the folks lowest on the socioeconomic ladder.
Of course it does.
That's one of the great reasons why I'm proud to be a Republican. More and more, our party is becoming the party of the working man and woman who understands the pocketbook issues and the fact that inflation is the invisible tax. It's taking money out of people's paychecks. I was reading something the other day online where they're talking about in the next year, the average family of 4 or 5's food bill could go up by $1,000 a month.
Sure.
Think about that, $12,000 a year just to food.
Yeah.
I mean, there goes...
For a family of 4.
Family of 4, or it may have been a family of 5, to be fair. But still, there goes the family vacation.
Sure.
A
new car.
Yep.
Exactly. Something has to give. And your average family, $12,000, or maybe that's tuition. If someone's becoming, just reaching college age, and now they have to choose between, putting food on the table and whether or not, and obviously health bills and all these different things that happen. But you got to have food. That's like number one.
It's already came to the point where people are deciding whether or not to buy food or put gas in the car to go to work.
Well, what was the Bloomberg article about not eating meat? They want you to eat more lentils and let Fido die because you can't afford vet bills. And when you have to start weighing all of these options, that was Bloomberg. So you actually brought up something that's kind of interesting. And you mentioned about the Republican Party is becoming more and more the party of the working man. And yet for years, we have sort of a stigma as Republicans that we're a party of old, rich, white men. Where did this change, or was that always a myth? I don't understand. I was born in the 60s. I mean, I was a child of the 60s with John F. Kennedy. He certainly was a Democrat, a privileged white man. Nobody had problems with his wealth as a Democrat. And yet all of a sudden the Republicans come on and we're the party of wealthy white men. Where did the myth come from, and how do we change that back to? I agree with you. We are the party of the working person.
Yeah. So, I don't know where the myth came from. What I will say is, my father's in the military, so I grew up. Massachusetts was always home. Both my mom and dad were from here. We spent a lot of our summers here. But as a kid, I grew up all over the country, and I think that what I would say is that myth is. It doesn't exist everywhere in the country. If you go to Florida, if you go to Texas, if you go to Middle America, outside of the two coasts, I think the Republican Party is already viewed by the vast majority of people as the party of the working people. I think here in Massachusetts, we're fighting an entrenched media machine that it's in their interest to paint us that way, and they'll do so as long as they can. But again, I firmly believe it already has changed. And I don't think it's worthwhile looking to see where it came from. And maybe it is that Boston, kind of the East Coast elites, if you will, of 100 years ago, they were Republicans. And that's just kind of a holdover. And politics things change very slowly. Yeah. So I could see where maybe that caught on. But look, I grew up with President Ronald Reagan, right? That was kind of the first president that I really remember. Jimmy Carter, a little bit. All I remember about Jimmy Carter was my parents complaining about the
gaslighting.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, gasoline.
I think as soon as I think of Jimmy Carter, I think of gas lines and soybeans.
Yeah. But I mean, Reagan was the president during my formative years, and again, a military family, and by no means were we upper middle class, even middle class, probably lower middle class. I mean, in Jimmy Carter's military, we spent time living in trailers because they didn't have housing. And my father was an officer. So, to me, Ronald Reagan was a man of the people.
Yes, he was.
And so I came of age and I just understood that he was about liberty and freedom and free enterprise and opportunity. There's no guarantees other than the guarantee of equal opportunity, and to me that just spoke to me.
And I mean, our backgrounds are very similar. I mean, my summers were spent in the back of a station wagon seeing the country, not flying to go to Florida or going to see an aunt in, Minnesota. We traveled the country in a station wagon. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Outside of the coasts, Republicans are seen as the working man's party. but you still have the brainwashing from generations ago that, you know, maybe it started back in the Great Depression with FDR. I don't know where it originated, but even to this day, I remember my mother saying, you know, the Democrats are for the working people and the Republicans are for the rich. You know, and it has to go back because that was my mother's era. You know, she was the oldest out of 7 kids, and, you know, I was the only Republican in the family, which was, you know, strange, but I met Ronald Reagan, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And so I was maybe 5 or 6 years old at the time. But that is 100% accurate, that it goes back to the Great Depression and it goes back to World War II, you know, FDR, and you had a lot of people that followed FDR because, you know, he may have brought the country back, but he's also, you know, quite the socialist as well.
Socialist. Let me ask you, Rick, you ran for office in 2018, and you have a lot of insights based on your experiences as a candidate in Massachusetts, as a Republican candidate in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And you've learned a lot to help candidates going forward. What did you learn running for office?
I think the biggest thing I learned as a Republican, if I was speaking to other Republican candidates or potential Republican candidates, it's a tough road. Let's be honest. And the biggest issue is infrastructure. So much of political campaigns, even now we're talking about how the Republican Party is painted, so to speak. And let's also take some of the blame. It's on us to explain to the people who we are as a party. That's our job, right? The Democrats certainly aren't going to help us, and neither is anyone else. But as a party, when you run for office, you have this idea that the party is this big organization and that there's a lot there. Mm-hmm. And the reality is there's not much there at all. Now maybe on the other side there is. As a matter of fact, I know there's more. They have more infrastructure. They've run more campaigns. I've mentioned to Chairman Jim Lyons on more than one occasion that the biggest problem in the Republican Party isn't a lack of candidates. It's a lack of campaign managers, right? Folks don't actually know how to run campaigns. Mm-hmm. And candidates who come forward, they're walking into an environment where there's not a lot of other candidates that can help them and coach them, and there's not a lot of folks who've run campaigns and certainly who've run successful campaigns. And so it's really like a startup opportunity. I mean, we're really building this from the ground up. And for so many years, for I think 3 decades, the Mass GOP has been all about the corner office. If we have the governor, then that's all that matters. And we do well there, and the reason for that is the people of the state are very smart, and they understand that the Democrat Party, left to its own devices, is not a good thing. I mean, it's not good for their pocketbook. It's not good for their community in so many different ways. And so they like to check the power of the supermajorities we have in the legislature with a Republican governor. But rather than building from that and using the corner office as a place to talk about our principles as Republicans, free enterprise, freedom, opportunity, it just has turned into this kind of old boys club where it just has become self-perpetuating. They just want to keep that office, and the patronage and hand out the jobs that go along with that, and that does nothing. And as a matter of fact, they're more than happy to let the down ticket deteriorate because that,
as long as they can capture that
exactly, as long as they stay kind of in that sweet spot, they don't care if we have a party.
But what does it say when, okay, you have a Republican governor, but if he vetoes something, the legislature just overrides him because they have a supermajority? So
everybody's happy that the governor almost has no power. He's neutered. Right. He or she is neutered.
It's even worse than that because so many times the governors will go along with it, yes. Right? And then the Democrats like to trot out the bipartisan.
Yes.
We passed this. It was bipartisan this and bipartisan that. And really, it's not at all. Without a functioning Republican Party and a go-along, get-along governor. Mm-hmm. I mean, basically, you have Democrats and Democrat light, and that's what we have to change. And the way to change it, what I learned in my run for office, it's at the local community level. Literally, running for your select board, school committee, running those local campaigns, getting the experience and understanding how to run those campaigns is absolutely vital. if we're going to rebuild this party. And we will rebuild this party, and it'll happen from the ground up. There's no governor in the future, who's going to be Republican, and certainly we will have them, who is going to be able to single-handedly accomplish that. It's going to be folks like yourselves, myself, in our towns, in our communities, talking to friends and neighbors, expressing what we're about and getting them to come to our side.
Now, do you think it's any different today because of the influence of President Trump and the Trump administration?
I think nationwide it absolutely is different. You saw, even in Massachusetts, I want to say it was 40,000, maybe 50,000 Democrats unenrolled in 2016 to vote for President Trump. Okay, those were blue-collar, working-class, union household Democrats who the light bulb went on. And they realized that what Donald Trump was talking about spoke to them as working men and women. So I do think it's, as a matter of fact, I've got some anecdotal data out there working with a couple campaigns already. A few town clerks, and you should check here in Fitchburg and in the local area, have told me that what they're seeing now is an exodus from the Democratic Party. They are surprised at the number of folks coming through their door who are Democrats who are unenrolling from the Democrat Party. So there's our opportunity. Folks are walking around on the street today, watching what's going on with our country, in the world, and at a minimum, they're saying to themselves, there's got to be a better way. What we're doing is not working. There has to be something else. The challenge, of course, is we have to prove to them that what we're offering will make their lives better.
Well, I think the pure fact of the economy, as well as just the general feeling across the country when President Trump and how successful the country had been, we were producing our own fuel. Which is
independent was
we were independent.
So important.
We stood on our own.
The border
exactly. We were getting the control of the border, and as soon as it was day one of the Biden administration, he started shutting down pipelines. You started seeing gas prices increase, and then they want to blame what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine. They want to blame that as the what's causing the increase in the gas prices. No, the increases of the gas prices happened before Russia even invaded Ukraine. It happened as soon as Biden came into office. That's when it started to increase.
Absolutely.
I have, my own sort of situation. I've been out collecting signatures for our wonderful candidates. And, there's always that percentage of people that walk by you like you don't exist. You're invisible, and that's fine. But many people, once they see what we're out there doing is collecting for Republican candidates, they will glom right to the table and say, where do I sign? And I think I have maybe 8 different candidates on our table. And they will go right from left to right and sign all of the candidate sheets. Because and as they're doing it, they're saying, we are in such a mess. I'm unenrolled, I'm changing my party. And when I say unenrolled, that's another interesting thing is the statistics that you brought up that night. What is it? 10% of the voters in Massachusetts are Republican registered.
It's about 10% Republican. It was 35% Democrat, but I think now they're headed down under 33, and it was 57% unenrolled. But that number continues to climb. It may be 58, 59% by the time we get to November this year.
Why do you think people want to stay unenrolled? I mean, I'm a proud Republican, and I'm a proud Republican because I feel the values better reflect my values, the values of the party. But why do you think so many people, they like this attitude, I like to vote for the person. I like to know the person. Well, they're never really going to know the person. They're going to know the person the candidate wants them to know. Yeah. They're all coming out there with their smiles. They're all coming out there kissing babies and, telling you how I feel your pain. But they don't really know the candidate. So how do we get people to just say, I am a Republican. I don't want to be this unenrolled anymore. I want to stand for something.
Again, I think you have to provide value. You have to give people a reason. And it's that same idea that we're only focused on the top of the ticket, right? So if all we have for Republicans is a Republican governor, the game is played in the Democratic primaries down below. So we have to provide the voters with choices, right? We have to show them that there's value in voting in the Republican primary because you have Republican primaries. You have multiple Republicans running. You have energy in the Republican Party. You have energy at the local level, and being a Republican matters. Now, it does matter, and we've seen, we can go back to the early 2000s during the Obama years when we were down to something like only 10 Republicans were running for re-election in the State House, and out of 160, that's an awful number. But there was energy, the Tea Party movement, and other things. We got our numbers up to 35, but we need to continue that. We need to push that. We need to push that further, and show people that there's a reason to be a Republican. There's a reason to be part of the party and associate with the party, and create these outside of 128. Okay. The demographics of our state looks a lot like New Hampshire. Okay, and New Hampshire is one of the most purple states in the country. So once we become competitive at the lower levels, I think you're going to see a huge change. I would be surprised if in the next 10 years we don't see the Republican Party over 15% enrollment. And again, these things take a long time because there's a lot of folks still registered as a Democrat who only vote Republican today. Okay, I mean, a lot of people just won't go down to the town hall and change the registration. Right. So I wouldn't get focused on the absolute numbers. It's which way are we going? And the other side is actually falling much faster than we are. Okay, but it doesn't fit the Boston Globe's narrative to say that. But that's what's happening. So people are becoming disenchanted with the Democratic Party far faster than anything that's going on with our party. So, but if we can just start to see that number start to tick up, I think that's going to be a seismic move in the political landscape in the state.
So how do we get the people to vote who just say, my vote doesn't count? I'm not even going to bother because the Democrats always win Massachusetts. How do we get them out there?
It's getting them introduced to good local Republican candidates, right? It's having them, folks come out and vote when they know the person running for office. When our Republican candidates are knocking at their door, talking to them, they can see that person right in front of them. They're like, I agree with this person. I agree with their stances. I like that they're for liberty and for free enterprise and opportunity. That's what our country is about. I'm going to support them. So it's making those personal connections. And once they start voting for the grassroots candidates, the down ticket, then they're voting for the whole ticket. See, and again, it all goes back to that top-down mentality, which doesn't work. That's what allows people to become disassociated from the process. Nobody knows the governor. No one walks into the governor's office. I mean, I'm sure there's some people, but the vast majority of people will never meet the governor. Okay? So there's no relationship there. We've got to bring it back. Politics is people. And we have to have people going door to door, talking to people, making eye contact, listening to folks' life stories, commiserating with them when necessary, sharing their success, all these different emotions that people go through. We have to connect with those and show them that we are them. We're the same as them. We have those same experiences, and we're the ones who are advocating policies that's going to help them the most in their daily lives. So, how do you see this election year, this 2022? Is it going to be a good year for Republicans? This may be the best year for Republicans in our lifetime, and I'm talking nationwide. I think in the state of Massachusetts, we're going to see gains in the legislature. I'm not sure how many seats we'll pick up. I do know that candidate recruitment is an all-time high since I've been involved politically. We're getting folks coming. People are talking about running for county seats and governor's counselor seats. We're going to have primaries in governor's council races. I mean, I'm sure most of your viewers might even ask, what is the governor's council? Yeah. They approve the judges. So in our state, the governor appoints the judges, but it's the governor's council, not the Senate or the legislature that approves them. And
they're all Democrats.
They're all there's 8 of them. They're all Democrats.
We lost our only Republican, and she was in our area.
Yep. But like I said, we're actually going to have Republican primaries for governor council seats, and that gives you an idea of the kind of energy that's going on in the Republican Party right now.
That's excellent. Excellent. So,
do you think President Trump helped or hurt ultimately the Republican brand?
Ultimately, I mean, history will be the judge, but my opinion is he helped the Republican Party. He is the one who recognized when he said we have to renegotiate NAFTA, we got to make the folks in NATO pay their way, America first. I think Trump's policies will be the foundation of the new Republican Party. Mm-hmm. The America first, the party of the working men and women, the trade deals that work for American workers, not for foreign workers, not for foreign countries. I think that's his legacy from a policy standpoint.
Probably border security added to that, and energy and independence.
Exactly. All these things, so many great things that look even better in hindsight. I think Republicans will be running on these issues for years, if not decades, to come. As far as his personal imprint, I think he gets it incomplete there. Clearly, he hasn't left the process. Yeah. He's still involved. I think none of us, I don't think anyone knows what's really on his mind except for him.
And that was part of his success.
It was.
On the world stage.
He was his own person.
Yeah.
He wasn't a puppet. He wasn't, he stood as Donald Trump. Yes. And that's exactly what we need as a president. We need somebody who says, I'm an American, I'm the president, and this is how it goes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But in terms of his final impact on the party, I think we have to wait and see, because I don't think it's over yet. So I'm not sure how we could say, but he's still got more to come.
Rick, this has been so much fun, and the half hour just zoomed right past us. And speaking of Zoom, I'm so happy we're back in the studio and we get to have you as our first guest after 2 years, and it's nice to be back at FATV. And we want to thank our viewers for watching us tonight and sitting in with the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. And remember, and it's something that Rick said, your local city or town Republican committee is your only grassroots organization that supports and holds dear your liberty, your constitutional rights, and your conservative values. We encourage you to join us. And why? Because we believe the Republican Party stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity for all people, and we always stand for freedom. Thank you and good night.
America, we stand for freedom, so let us all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might.